average person. He blended in with everybody. I mean, he talked a lot. When we had a barbecue down here in the backyard last July, but the only time he didn't talk too much is when, like, if I'd meet him in the garage by myself, or he was coming in and I was going out, or the other way around, all he would say is hi, and that was it. But if you tried to start a conversation with him, it was kind of useless. You know, he never really volunteered anything. So.
How do you feel now that you found out he was a neighbor?
Scared still, because he really was a neighbor. I lived right next door in the next apartment next to him. And it just gives me the creeps is kind of an understatement.
Welcome, I'm Matt from Untrained Terrain, and today we're going to be talking about Ed Kemper. Born December 18, 1948 in Burbank, California, Ed Kemper III was one of 3 boys born to Clarnell and Ed Kemper Jr. Edmund Jr. was a World War II vet who tested nuclear weapons at Pacific Proving Grounds before returning to California and worked as an electrician. Ed's mom, Clarnell Elizabeth Kemper, previously called Clarnell Stage, was a native of Montana and a stay-at-home mom. Ed Jr. later stated that suicide missions in wartime was actually harder than living with Clarnell and the boys. Now, Ed weighed over 13 pounds as a newborn, and by the time he was in first grade, he was a foot taller than his peers. For all the people for God to make big and bulky, why would he make Ed Kemper big and bulky? I mean, why couldn't he choose like a police officer, somebody who could do good with that, you know? Early on in his childhood, Edmund would begin to display antisocial behavior, including such ones as being cruel to animals, even decapitating and placing one cat's head onto a stake and displaying it. He would later state that he derived pleasure by lying to his family about the dead cat. When Ed was 13, he killed the family cat because he thought he favored him more than his sister, and he would actually keep parts of the cat in his closet until his mother found them and disposed of them. When he was a young boy, he would arm himself with his father's bayonet and sneak to his second-grade teacher's house and watch her from the bushes. Now this escalated as he got older, and by the time he was a young adult and an older teenager, he was basically a full-fledged peeping Tom. As a young teenager, Kemper got along great with his father, and he was devastated when his parents separated in 1957, later divorcing in 1961. His mother would often make him sleep in the basement behind a locked door because she was scared that he would kill his sisters because his sister tormented him for his large size so terribly. He stood at an immaculate 6'4" by the time he was 15 years old. Now, Kemper's mother never showed him affection over fears it would turn him gay, apparently. She would tell Ed that he constantly reminded her of his father and that no woman would ever love him. By the age of 15, Ed ran away from home in hopes of finding his father in California. And by the time he arrived there, he found that his father had married someone else and he had a new stepmother and new stepbrothers. Now Ed would stay with his father's new family for a while before being sent to his paternal grandparents by his dad. They lived on a ranch in Sierra Nevada, just 2 miles west of the town of Norfolk. Now, Ed hated living there. He would describe his grandfather as senile and said that his grandmother would often demasculate him. On August 27, 1964, at the age of 15, Kemper took a rifle and fatally shot his grandmother once in the head and twice in the back, even stabbing her several times. Now, his grandfather wasn't home at the time, but when he arrived home, Ed too shot him dead in the driveway. When the police arrived, Ed said that he shot his grandfather because he was scared that his grandfather would be angry at him for killing his wife. He also stated that he killed his grandmother because he just wanted to know what it would be like to kill Grandma. His crimes were deemed incomprehensible for a 15-year-old to commit, and court psychiatrists diagnosed him paranoid schizophrenic. He was sent to Atascadero State Hospital, a maximum security facility in St. Louis County that houses mentally ill convicts. Now, while he was at Atascadero, it was found he had no flight of ideas, no interference with thought, no expressions of delusion or hallucinations, and no evidence of bizarre thinking. Seeing him as intelligent and introspective, and he was given an IQ test and even scored 145. Now, Ed was a model prisoner and outshined the other inmates because he did everything he was told. And on December 18, 1969, against the advice of his psychiatrist, Ed was sent out on parole to live with his mother. Kemper later demonstrated to a psychiatrist that he was fully rehabilitated and they would expunge his juvenile record of all charges. Now, while he was staying with his mother in Santa Cruz, Ed would attend community college and had hopes of becoming a police officer, believe it or not. In 1971, Kemper gained employment at State of California Division of Highways. During this time, his relationship with Clarnell, his mother, continued to remain toxic, and the neighbors often overheard the arguing. After saving enough money, Ed would move in with a friend in Aladema into a new apartment. Kemper, then in his early 20s, met a student from Turlock High School, and they two would become engaged in March 1973. The engagement lasted a little over a year, but ultimately ended after Ed's second arrest. Later that same year, after getting a job with the Highway Division, Ed was riding his motorcycle and got hit by a car and was badly injured on his right arm. Now, after a lawsuit, Ed would receive $15,000, and in turn he would buy his first car, a 1969 Ford Galaxy. He would then drive around, and he discovered that there was a lot of female hitchhikers, so he started to keep plastic bags and handcuffs in his car. Ed later stated that he would drive around and drop off around 150 female hitchhikers, just testing out the waters, as he put it. This was soon before experiencing violent sexual urges, which he called little zapples, and soon began acting upon said urges. Between May 1972 and April 1973, Kemper killed 8 people. He would pick up female students who were hitchhiking and take them to isolated areas where he would kill them in a variety of different ways. He would then take the bodies back to his mother's home where he decapitated them, performed ormatio on their severed heads, and had sex with them before dismembering them and disposing of their bodies. Irrumatio basically means that he would perform oral on the decapitated heads, or I guess they would perform oral on him. On May 7, 1972, Kemper, driving from Berkeley, picked up 2 18-year-old hitchhiking students from Fresno State University. After driving off-road, Kemper handcuffed and stabbed both victims to death in his car. He would later take the victims to his apartment, where he would dismember them, have sexual intercourse with the bodies, and then later dispose of the body parts. On January 7, 1973, Kemper, who had moved back in with his mother, was driving around the Carbillo College campus when he picked up 18-year-old student Cindy Shull. He went to a wooded area with her where he fatally shot her with a .22 caliber pistol, later taking her body to his mother's house and dismembering it.
She was a really beautiful person, not just to look at, but to talk to. And she was just a really fine girl.
He kept Shaw's head for a few days, often engaging in irrumatio with it, which we earlier discussed. He would then bury her head in his mother's garden, apparently facing his mother's bedroom window because she always wanted people to look at her. Over the course of a few weeks, people started finding body parts on the side of the road, along with Shaw's head and right hand. Now, police were on constant outlook for this person and any clues to who this person was that was committing these crimes. Now, with knowledge of a serial killer lurking around town, students were informed to only go into cars that had a sticker from the university on the bumper. And luckily for Ed, his mother worked at the university, so he had a sticker on his car. On February 5th, 1973, after a heated argument with his mother, Kemper would go out in search of victims. He encountered 23-year-old Rosaline Thorpe after she exited a building after a lecture. Needing a ride, she jumped in the passenger seat with Ed. Shortly after, the duo spotted 20-year-old Alice Liu and would pick her up. Now, after driving around for a while, they would go to a wooded area, and Ed Kemper would take his pistol and shoot Thorpe in the head 3 times, turn around, and shoot Lewin once in the temple with his pistol. This time, he beheaded the bodies in his car, took the bodies to his mother's house, had sex with them, dismembered them, and then disposed of the body parts. After coming home drunk and awakening Ed, Ed's mother went to bed. While she was sleeping, Ed bludgeoned her to death with a claw hammer and slit her throat with a penknife, later stating that he cut her head off, yelled at it for an hour, and then continued to play darts with it. After killing his mother, he went to a bar. Upon returning, he invited 59-year-old Sarah Hallett, his mother's best friend, over to watch a movie. When she arrived, he strangled her and put her body in the closet. Afterwards, Kemper drove to Pueblo, California, and he had 3 guns with him and tons of ammunition because he thought he was the subject of a massive manhunt. Now, after not hearing any news of the murder of his mother and her friend, Kemper would call 911 and he would admit to killing them. At first, the 911 operator didn't believe him and told him to call back, but when he called back, he asked for an officer he knew, told the officer the details, and they came and arrested him. At first, the 911 operator didn't believe him and told him to call back, but when he called back, he asked for an officer he knew, told the officer the details, and they came and arrested him. On May 7, 1973, Kemper was indicted on 8 counts of first-degree murder.
This is a day of waiting in Santa Cruz. Residents are watching carefully as sheriff's investigators and District Attorney Peter Chang begin to build a case against Edward Kemper III. Chang's office is in this building, but today he's in Colorado talking to Kemper, the man who was supposed to have told Pueblo police that he had killed his mother and another woman in a duplex in the Santa Cruz community of Aptos Seacliff. Apparently, Kemper also told Pueblo police that he had previously killed 6 college girls in the Santa Cruz area. Those murders had been part of a series that had led Santa Cruz County residents to fear their county was becoming some kind of murder capital. Herbert Mullen was charged with 10 murders earlier this year. He's awaiting trial. The Kerner confession, if it is indeed that, would go far toward solving the rest in the unsolved string. Of course, it's a long way from here to conviction, but even at this point, some interesting questions can be raised. When he was 15 years old, Edward Kemper was arrested, charged, and convicted with murdering his grandparents. He had been treated for mental illness, yet he was able to purchase a .44 Magnum handgun, one of the most powerful ever made. Do the gun laws that made that purchase possible need review? And what about the decision to parole Kemper in 1970? Did psychiatric evaluation play a role in that release? Kemper has not been tried and found guilty of anything, but if he is, the system itself may stand convicted, found guilty of having failed to protect society, and even of having failed to protect Kemper from himself. Kemper is already on his way back from Colorado. He's due to arrive here on Friday when further questioning will take place. But there's some question with his history of mental illness that he'll ever stand trial. If there is a trial, it will take place here in this courthouse in Santa Cruz. Bill Hillman, Eyewitness News, at the Santa Cruz County Courthouse.
Now, due to his confessions, his only option for a trial was to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. By the time his trial started, Kemper would try to commit suicide twice while in custody. His trial officially started on October 23, 1973. Now, he would be found sane by 4 different doctors. One of the doctors even stated that Ed liked the way that he had infamy for being labeled as a serial killer. And on November 8, 1973, by a jury of 6 men and 6 women, Kemper was found guilty on all 8 charges of first-degree murder.
I'm someone who has been a murderer for almost 20 years.
Can you say how many people might be doing crimes like you were doing?
It would be a guess, but it's not. It's far more than 35. It isn't that impossible in this society. It happens.